and welcome to the Road to Genome podcast, which has now gone national, with this episode being brought to you jointly by the Genomic Medicine Service in both the North Eastern Yorkshire and the South East. I'm your host, Helen Bethel, Genetic Counsellor and Workforce Development and Education Lead. Today we're recording inside the busy Guy's Hospital, which sits in the heart of London. I'm delighted to be joined by Donna Kirwan, Lead Midwife for Genomics in the Nursing and Midwifery Genomics team for NHS England. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
So can I ask, how many job titles do you currently have and what do each of those mean?
Okay, so my main job title is the National Clinical Lead Midwife for Genomics at NHS England. I'm actually a registered midwife and nurse by background, and I do have a couple of other titles which reflect the work that I'm doing at the moment for NHS England. So I'm the co-chair for the National Genomics Education Programme Genotes Fetal and Women's Health Group. And I'm also the chair for the National Midwives and Genetics and Genomics Network, which we call MIGS.net for short.
Those all sound absolutely fascinating roles. So can you talk us through what each of those roles are and what it is you're doing within them?
So in my national profile, I oversee the implementation of embedding genomics in maternity services. And as co-chair for the Fetal and Women's Health Genotes group, I actually work with a clinical subspecialist for genetics. And we started out together on the Genotes journey, bringing together like-minded midwives, genetic counsellors and obstetricians around the table to actually write the content for the Fetal and Women's Health Genotes. So that's been running now for, I'd say, about 3 years. And we've got a fantastic group of people writing that content. And we are the only group where we've got not just clinicians, but nurses and midwives, genetic counsellors and midwives. And the MIGS.net group basically came together around about 2022. Started off very small with just 7 midwives around the table and myself. And now we've got about 60 members.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so the membership essentially are midwives with an interest in or work directly with genomics. So they're mainly antenatal screening coordinators, fetal medicine midwives. We also have midwives working in different levels of the system, matrons, managers, and we also have a subgroup of that. The individuals in the subgroup, they are not midwives, but they have an interest that they work directly with genomics. So we've got Ed Miller from the National Genomics Education Programme. We've got a clinical scientist from the Birmingham Laboratory Hub. We've got representation from clinical genetics, Demetra Georgiou, who's based in Imperial. And that little subgroup seems to be growing as well. So it really is collaborative work because what we don't want to do is, try and do things on our own. This is all about working as a team and pulling the intelligence in from different directions.
And it sounds like you're, kind of alongside your roles, you're developing these amazing vehicles essentially to really make sure that what is being created at a national level has got a method of actually being able to get out on the ground. So it's amazing to hear that the group has grown, as you say, from 7 to 60. Is that right with the right numbers? Then that's hugely impressive.
And also key to that group are the lead GMSA midwives from around the country, which is fantastic. And I've encouraged them to grow their own regional MIGs, which some have done and others are evolving in that space. But we also have research midwives as well. And recently onboarded 2 midwifery educators, one from the north, one from the south. And so I can just see this mushrooming and the magic is beginning to start because this is all about joining up the dots of a common thread.
And if anybody's listening who is, kind of inspired by this and wants to be part of that group, how would they go about that?
So you can get in touch with your lead GMSA midwife and obviously they would love you to be part of their regional group, but they usually contact me and then I onboard them at the next monthly meeting. So we onboarded 10 last month, which was amazing. But it is the portal to get the activity that is required for maternity to get done.
Incredible. Yeah. And so thinking back to your childhood then, when you were aspiring, and designing your career, is this where you thought you'd end up?
Not at all. No, not at all. It wasn't on my radar at all.
No.
I was just interested in singing, dancing, being involved with plays. I was very creative. Yeah. So my goal was to actually be a teacher in music and dance.
Okay.
And in the fourth year of senior school, I was encouraged to go for a week's sabbatical at a local teacher training college, which I did. And I thought, that's it. I've found my place. This is where I want to be.
Okay.
But my mum, probably with a wise head, said, it's a lovely career, but you can't dance forever.
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, okay. But she had lots of friends who were nurses and midwives, and obviously chatting to them refocused my thinking. And at the time I was working in the city centre, happily selling clothes to lots of lovely people. And that's when I applied for a nursing post. Midwifery was on the horizon, but it was in the distant future for me. Anyway, I applied, and then a year later I got a place to train at Broad Green Hospital and the Royal Liverpool Hospital, and I absolutely love my training days. The last 6 months of that training, unfortunately, my father took ill and had a diagnosis of colorectal cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it was a very short turnaround from diagnosis to his death. And that was tough. And things didn't go quite right with my final sitting my exams, so I had to resit them. But anyway, I staffed on a very busy gynae ward at the Royal Liverpool Hospital. And then during that journey, my mum then became unwell, and once again a late diagnosis, but this time it was breast cancer. And I just felt like I was revisiting all of this all over again. And she passed away, after, the treatment was chemotherapy, but it didn't help. And so I was in the position working on this very busy gynae ward, dealing with lots of women with cancer, and I wasn't enjoying it.
No, you weren't in the right space.
No. And my nursing officer had a chat with me and said, what about midwifery? Have you thought about midwifery? And I said, I have. I said, but I wasn't planning to do it, this soon. But anyway, I applied, and that year I got a place at Liverpool Maternity Hospital. So off I went and set sail down that route. Absolutely loved it. And became a rotational midwife for about 5 years, and then started to get itchy feet because, I was thinking, I'm soul searching here. There's a little bit more I've got to give to this profession. And I actually applied to work in America.
Wow. And
there was a big recruitment drive happening across the country. So I applied, I did the exams, I got a place to be an OB-GYN nurse over in Santa Monica. And one of the managers said, stop right there. Why are you doing this? There's going to be lots of opportunities coming up here. And he told me about plans to develop a fetal medicine centre. And I said to him, what's a fetal medicine centre? What's that about? And he'd actually worked in London. So, down here, there were quite a few. And he said, you need to go down to London and do this exploration for yourself and do some fact finding. So he signposted me to a few hospitals. So off I went, paid my way, got a train, and went to King's. That's where I first met Kipros. Went to Queen Charlotte's. Charles Rodeck was still working there, and Professor Peter Soothill was there. He was their senior registrar, and the light bulb moment happened. Because it involved a different way of presenting yourself as a midwife. Came back, and then I had the interview. And I'd worked out a little plan in my mind of what a fetal medicine midwife would do, how the landscape would look. Because at that time, there was just a senior fetal medicine specialist and a radiographer from Alderhay Children's Hospital. And I got the job, and the rest is history. So I was in service for 11 years. And during that 11 years, I just feel like I packed so much in. First and foremost, to normalise what the midwife does, because I remember an interview, the head of midwifery was on, there were 4 people on the panel, and the head of midwifery, Margaret Brazy, said to me after I got the job, "You do realise you'll never be a midwife again?" And I was so upset.
Yeah.
I thought, oh,
what does she mean
what
by
do you
that?
mean by that?
Yeah.
And she said, well, you won't be delivering babies, you won't be doing this, you won't be doing that, but you'll be supporting doctors, obstetricians to care for these women. And I just wanted to turn that round on its head, because first and foremost, pregnant women feel they are pregnant. No matter what's happening with their pregnancy, they are pregnant, and they want to be treated as pregnant women. And going into a fetal medicine unit puts them in a different context, because it is medicalised. But from my perspective, I wanted to make that a normal experience as possible for them. I wanted that continuity of care. So, of course, they, would see me, but then I would be communicating with their community midwife and following that care pathway to the end. Very earlier on in my fetal medicine journey, there was a weekly clinic to see women with a higher risk chance for Down's trisomy or Patau's. And there was a rotation of registrars who would come to the unit for half a morning and do an amniocentesis. Well, they'd be counselling them for their higher risk chance. And there were a few women who had miscarriages, and that really upset me. And so I reported this to the clinical director, and I gave them the statistics, which were small, thankfully, but it was evidence.
Yeah.
And I said, this has got to change, because I'm not happy, chaperoning women for this procedure.
Knowing it could be better.
Yeah, things could be better. And I just turned around and I just said off the top of my head, do you know what? I think I could do it better. And he went, what do you mean? I said, well, I've seen you perform so many scans and amnios. With the right training, you develop competence. So I said, if I was trained in ultrasound and you trained me how to needle, I said, I could do that and set up a clinic. So he said, well, just hold it there. So he thought about it, and he had a discussion at board level with the other obstetricians in the unit. And they said, well, yeah, we don't see what the problem is.
Wow.
It's got to improve. And so off I went to Lancaster University, trained as a sonographer, and came back, qualified, and then was trained to RCOG standards by 2 of the consultants in fetal medicine, Steve Walkinshaw and Professor Jacques Welferovich, to do amniocentesis.
Wow.
And I brought together a policy and standards, which were signed off by the trust. And I also trained some registrars to do amniocentesis. And I ran that clinic for 5 years, and it meant that I could counsel the women who had received a higher chance screening result, which I did do anyway. But on top of that, I could build that package of care.
Wow.
They could have an amniocentesis with me and not see a stranger. I knew that I was competent. I kept an audit. I kept track of everything, and it was seamless care. And then bolted at the end of that, when a woman came back with a result for trisomy, I then built on a package of care to see them in the home with the community midwife and break that news to them. So yeah, that ran for 5 years, and I published that information in one of the midwives magazines called Practicing Midwife. And then other midwives started to read this and think, oh, is it possible in my unit? So Chester, Countess of Chester Hospital, 2 midwives followed the same pathway, as did a midwife that worked with Professor Mark Kilby. And yeah.
How incredible, Donna. Like, such a vision that you've created, and to build it and break such ground to achieve that is just phenomenal.
And it was a wonderful feeling to have those women in a cohort, in a niche group of women to give them all that support, because it's a heartbreaking situation.
Yeah.
And you go through that journey with them. And then, of course, termination of pregnancy was the choice of, some of them. And so that pathway then sent me up to delivery suite to speak to, the midwife who would be looking after that woman. And then obviously once she delivered, go back and see her. So it was all connected up. So that was a big thing. And then one of my real interests was in rhesus disease. We'd see lots of when we were a tertiary level centre to treat women with rhesus antibodies who were rhesus negative. And the first intrauterine transfusion I remember we did, not the first, but the first delicate procedure we did was a woman who was 17 weeks who had really high antibodies. And we saw that woman through to the end of a successful pregnancy.
Yeah.
But, rhesus disease is genetically inherited and midwives don't realise that unless you tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, you do know about genetics.
Did you recognise it at the time as genetic, or is it only in hindsight you've kind of...
No, I did recognise it as genetics because I then wanted to know about their lived experience of coming to a fetal medicine unit in this very medicalised domain, and how they felt about being scanned on a regular basis, having intrauterine transfusions. So I set out to do a Master of Philosophy at Manchester, and that was my thesis, the lived experience of women with antibodies and pregnancy. So that was just, a great experience, and that led me on to being part of the anti-D working group at the British Society for Haematological Medicine. So all these little initiatives, there's little dendrites, running off in different directions, but I still today think, the whole thing's fascinating. Yeah. And, it's come on from strength to strength with, different ways of caring for women on that care pathway. And then, typical of me, fetal surgery, what's all that about? Yeah. So I was aware, and I saw a TV programme, and it was about Professor Mike Harrison, who was based in California, who was this pioneer of fetal surgery, particularly doing research of repair for spina bifida. And I thought, this is amazing. And then clinicians who were trained by him then went to different parts of America. So an opportunity came to apply for what they called a staff travel award in the trust. And I applied to go to America to be part of this team. And I got the money.
Wow.
So I went to Philadelphia, where the Sick Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is. And I spent a couple of weeks with Dr. Scott Adzik to go over there and watch how they work. And it was the first time that I came across the concept of what a real MDT is, multidisciplinary team. And it was a room actually bigger than this, but around the table were an array of clinicians, all focusing on plans for pregnancies, walking through the door where there was a fetal abnormality. And obviously, those women where there was a baby with a spina bifida. It's also where I first saw laser ablation for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. Whilst I was there, I had the experience of going to a state hospital, and it was just so different. It was just so different. The population type was different. The waiting areas were crammed. There was long episodes of patients waiting around. You could see the difference between the private and the state sector. And the other thing that really sticks out in my mind about going to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which they called CHOP, was when a pregnant woman came to the department, the first place she went to was the reception desk, where the receptionist produced a paper document, and basically she was paying for a treatment. Little boxes were ticked off for various things, even down to the packs that would be used to do an amniocentesis and what have you. And it was a real revelation. I learned so much from that. And fast forward now, they're doing fetal surgery over in UCH with Professor Anna David.
Wow.
But back then, what year would that have been? I think that was about 1998, 99.
Wow, so really advanced at that time, yeah.
Yeah.
So you then came back to the UK, and then what happened there?
Yeah, continued the job that I loved, absolutely loved fetal medicine. And it was probably about 6 years into setting up that service that I got some part-time midwives and a healthcare assistant, because that service was just really busy, being a tertiary referral centre for Cheshire and Merseyside.
And I guess right on the cusp in that kind of time period of increasing what was being offered.
Yes, definitely so.
Kind of right at the right time, really.
Yeah, definitely so. And I recall different genetic tests starting to come on board.
Yes.
Fish.
Yeah.
So we had the standard carrier type, then fish came, then QFPCR
Can you explain what those are? So what fish is?
It's rapid diagnosis, essentially. Fluorescent in situ hybridization is the longer term.
Yeah.
And we would offer fish to women who had had an amniocentesis or CVS, because you could get a quicker diagnosis than wait for a cultured carrier type, which would take 2 to 3 weeks. But we would say to them, because it was still in its early days, this is provisional. They're going to look for 3 trisomies, but the answer's more or less right.
Yeah.
And
it's a way, isn't it, of being able to paint the chromosomes with different colours so that when you look under the microscope, it's very clear from the colours what's present and where there might be changes in the chromosomes. Yeah.
And then from fish, QFPCR, and then microarray. And that just blew my mind. I thought, what's microarray? We're then moving into genomics, although nobody called it genomics, but the molecular lab was now using this newer technology with these little chips. And interestingly, I went to a conference in San Diego in 2010. It was a fetal medicine conference, and there's a story behind that. I ended up being there on my own because the Icelandic volcano went off. So the staff that were going to come over from the national programme who I was working for then, down in Exeter for the fetal anomaly screening programme, they couldn't get over. I was stuck over there, but hey-ho. But you start to, communicate with more people than you would normally do. And there was a stand in the conference hall that said Illumina.
Okay, yeah.
And there were a couple of reps on there, and they had all these fancy machines. And I thought, oh, yeah, let's strike up a conversation with Illumina. Yeah. And they were talking about sequencing, and the penny just didn't land at all.
No.
It was, totally off my radar. But that was the first time I heard the word genomics and sequencing and Illumina, as we know now. So then there was a window of opportunity to move on from clinical. And in 2001, I then worked for the UK National Screening Committee as an antenatal and newborn screening coordinator covering for the northwest of England. And boy, did I land in a very strange place. I was in a health authority, then I moved to a PCT, and it was just, such a different place to be. And I had to grow and create connections, and they were mainly in public health because public health were driving this with Professor Sir Muir Gray, who was an absolutely amazing leader. And I stayed in posts for about 7 years, implementing those services. So I saw them through right from inception. Across the country, there was just double testing, 2 analytes, to screen for Down syndrome. Then it went to triple testing. And then, as you know now, we have combined testing that involves nuchal and quadruple screening. But yeah, that's 7 years. Yeah. Hemoglobinopathy screening came in as well, infectious diseases. So I was at the beginning of those journeys. I'm proud to say supported maternity services to get them in place. And then a national opportunity came up, which was with the NHS Fetal Anomaly Screening Programme, and their headquarters was down in Exeter University. And we were a small team of about 12, but again, did some great work in bringing ultrasound to life, because prior to that, sonographers would come out of university. There were no clear standards and competencies for how they scanned, and we brought that together. So I led on the work for developing the first national ultrasound standards for fetal anomaly screening, and it was a huge piece of work. It took over a year. But what we have today is a much better service. Sonographers scan the 4 chambers of the heart and the outflow tracts. They scan so much, more than what they did then. Nuchal translucency and the quality assurance that goes with it to make sure those measurements are accurate. It was great. And then 2012, things changed. With the NHS white paper, there were lots of cuts, and they had to make UK national screening programmes leaner. The UK national screening programmes had gone from that creativity of implementation and development to moving into quality assurance. And it was at that point that I stepped back, but I've reconnected with them again through the work I'm doing now.
Okay. Yeah. So it's come full circle.
Meeting the people I left behind 10 years ago. Yeah. And that's one thing that is important to me. They say that you meet people going up and you meet people going down. And no matter what I've done in my career, I always want to be me, because you don't know who you're going to meet coming up and coming down. But, we've got to work together to make change across the board for our pregnant population and also workforce. So
after your screening role, where did you move to next?
So I went freelance for a couple of years. I wasn't happy with that, I'll be honest, because you're basically left to your own devices to then start networks up again and try and find work. And I really felt like I jumped off a cliff after my national role had finished. I was really upset about that. And people were saying, oh, there'll always be a job, have you looked here? Have you looked there? But you've got to have that job that's in your heart. And so I was lucky to get some great opportunities with national project work. So the RCOG contacted me, and I did some work for them and the old Department of Health. And that took me all around the country to 25 maternity services. And then I bumped into a genetic counsellor who I knew from years gone by. And she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, this is the situation at the moment. She said, I think there's going to be a job advertised for the 100,000 Genomes project. And she told me all about this. And I said, okay. So I applied for that job. And I got it because it's all about transferable skills. But I went from, a higher senior band down to a band 6. But I was happy with that. It reflects the job that you're doing. But I sat in clinical genetics. I learned so much from doing that job. And then I set up the pathway for the cancer recruitment. And it was for ovarian endometrial cancer. So I had the best of both worlds, plus that included, pregnant women. The cancer side was hard. I really felt for those.
Back on the reasons you'd moved away from that field, it must.
Yeah. It resonated so much. And, the majority of those women, were saying, I want to join this project, not for me, but for my daughter, son, grandchildren. It was quite a moving experience to be with those women. Some, were coming to the end of their days, but still wanted to join. And the rare disease patients, once again, I'd never had an experience like it, seeing families where, there were multiple people in one family with a particular condition, intellectual disability. And one patient that stuck out in my mind was a couple that I recruited, and I've spoken about this couple before. I'm still in contact with them. She was pregnant. She was 33 weeks pregnant. She was in a different hospital, and her fetal movements just dropped off. And and she was quickly referred to Liverpool Women's Hospital because we've got, the neonatal and SCBU there. Emergency caesarean section, and the baby was born very floppy, couldn't breathe on her own, and she had assisted ventilation. And the paediatricians knew there was something really serious going on with this baby, and they did routine genetic testing, but they knew about the 100,000. So I went to see the couple, talked them through the process, and said it was entirely up to them. 100,000 was looking at, whole genome sequencing. Hopefully we could find what was going on, but there was no guarantees. Maybe not now, but maybe in the future there could be an answer. And while all that was going on, this little baby was deteriorating, and they made the decision to switch off the life support, which was awful. Anyway, 18 months later, they got an answer.
Wow.
They got an answer. And it was a mitochondrial condition, passed from mum. And although they went through that awful experience, what it did give them was an answer in which they could plan future pregnancies.
Yeah.
And it's lovely now that they've got another little girl and they've got a little boy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because she had CVS, and, clinical scientists knew exactly where to go, what gene to touch and what to look for. The little girl's like mum, a carrier, but otherwise healthy, and the little boy has got no variants.
Yeah, fantastic.
So that's a really great news story.
Yeah, yeah. So from 100K, where did you go?
So then I thought, what am I going to do now? Because this has come to an abrupt end, and obviously very upset again. So I went back into clinical, worked on gynae, did a bit of a rotation around gynae, worked on the wards, worked in theatres, worked on emergency room, because I was soul searching. At this point, I thought I could step back into nursing, or I could step back into midwifery. And then another opportunity came, and it was for this job.
Yeah. So can you tell me then, the amount of skills and experience you have, Donna, is literally so inspiring. Like hearing, everywhere you go, it sounds like you are constantly looking for making things better and improvement. And your fearlessness at thinking outside the box is I genuinely find really inspiring. It's fantastic. So thinking now about all the skills that you bring to your lead role, can you talk us through a little bit about the projects you're working on at the minute in your lead role and what you're doing?
So I have affiliation to the Royal College of Midwives, naturally, because I'm a member and because of what I do. And they asked me, would I develop a module for genetics and genomics and midwifery for the iLearn portfolio. So the iLearn portfolio essentially is another portal to tap into, if you remember, and there's a suite of learning resources in which you can gain CPD points, and obviously, that's good for your revalidation. So yeah, I've developed a lovely online module, and it went live to tie in with the RCM conference. And it's interactive, and it's really quite magical because they've got a great IT team there. So what I've written on paper, they've brought it to life through animation.
And can anyone access that?
If you're a member, you must be a member of the Royal College of Midwives to access it.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's lovely. I'm really proud of it. But I'm saying to them, there's more we can do.
Yeah.
But I might just hand that over to the lead midwives to develop other things, because you could just go on and on with this.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I mentioned MIGS before, Midwives and Genetics and Genomics Network, and that is just amazing. It's fantastic because I'm working with like-minded people.
Yeah.
They do see me as the senior lead, but always in my career, there's people I aspire to. Sir Professor Muir Gray, who was a public health doctor, Pat Ward, who was the national lead for the fetal anomaly screening programme. And the way they lead is the way to make friends and make things happen. And I've not strayed from that. I think it's in my gift to be like that anyway. And so the projects that I'm involved with MIGs, predominantly the lead GMSA midwives, they take the lead in those projects with my oversight and support and guidance. Because obviously working at NHS England is so different to working in a trust or even in a GMSA. But we are winning, and there's some really great projects that are coming out of MIGs. But again, we have that sense check from the subgroup who are there in some ways as oversight to make sure that we have the voice and the perception and the buy-in from other disciplines like yourself, clinical scientists, and education. So one of the projects which has come out of Central and South is called the Genomics Learning Passport, which has been led by Karen Creed, who's the lead midwife there, and she's fantastic. And I've supported Karen in developing this work. And just this week, we spoke to the Lead Midwives for Education. So they are a national group. So these are the midwives who are in institutes of higher education who sit, they belong to the NMC. The NMC look after that group.
But link in with the universities and those that are being trained. Okay.
And we have two of that. Importantly. Yeah, and we have two of that group also on MIGs. And so Karen presented that work and people were really happy with it because, as you can imagine, out in the institutes of higher education, they are really busy. They're busy managing students, managing a curriculum that is really focused on maternity, birth, and the woman's pregnant journey. The issue around complex pregnancy and fetal abnormality and genetics is there, but we are leaders for, the normal pathway of pregnancy. And so there's a lot of influencing that I am doing to support them to bring genomics into the curricula. And Karen's work will certainly support that. There are about 4 universities that have started the genomics journey, integrating that into the 3-year programme. And my vision is that at some point, you'll have graduates coming out who are genomic competent. They know about it, they feel confident about it, and they align with midwives in practice.
I think my experiences with the HEIs is that they're all acutely aware and want to include it. It's just there's so much on the curriculum, it's nowhere to put it. And also they themselves in their training, this has come so quickly that actually they themselves are not, kind of overly competent themselves in genomics, so they don't have the confidence to deliver it. So, I imagine that in 10 years' time, this will feel different, that, there'll be people confident in delivering it. I hope there will be from the work we're doing. But I hear you from, we've been developing a extended educational network up in northeastern Yorkshire. I'm very keen to include the HEIs within that, to kind of make those networks and make those connections so that we, give them an opportunity to be part of the discussion of just that gentle encouragement of kind of getting more genomic content on their curriculum.
I feel like I've got a couple of, 3 wins in that space, in the fact that we've got 2 lead midwife educators on MIGs.
That's incredible,
But also, because I was invited to write a book chapter on genetics and genomics for a key midwifery book called May's Midwifery, and that came out this year. So it's the first time genomics is in a midwifery book, and I've still got my May's Midwifery from when I was a student, and it's boring really, it's black and white, and the section on genetics is just like about 3 pages. But this is, substantial. But I've also recently been invited by one of the lead midwives for education from, I think it's Leicester University, Professor Jane Marshall, to write a new chapter on genetics and genomics for Miles Midwifery, which is a competitor for May's Midwifery. So they're listening, and we're getting there. But like screening, this is not going to happen overnight. No. This takes years. And I keep saying to the lead midwives, I'm just as impatient as you, but I know, having been in a national role before, this is going to take time to embed.
Just such a champion of change, Donna, in terms of, you know, what you've achieved in other fields. But, you know, I can see where, you know, like just even that, as we said at the beginning, building that vehicle of how to use this. So, you know, you've right from the outset just been, you know, kind of building that group. So, you know, getting the right people at the table. So those midwife educators at the table, so that there's a direct route for taking what you've developed, those passports, right into the heart of where it's absolutely needed. So, yeah, that's absolutely incredible. Yeah. So, your passion comes across incredibly in all that you do. What is a rewarding day like for you?
A rewarding day is getting an email from a lead GMSA midwife to say, oh, there's a midwife who'd like to join MIGS.
Yeah.
That's brilliant because you've tapped into another soul to come on that journey. Yeah. And we recently onboarded a maternity support worker.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Who's not, you know, she's not qualified. She's a maternity support worker, but has an interest in this, which is fabulous.
Yeah, because you wonder whether as she goes on to train, what she would then take with her on that training journey.
Yeah, exactly. Well, she wants to train in midwifery, which is great.
So rather than looking for it in her degree, she's going to have it from the outset to take with her, which is incredible. Yeah.
Also, again, connecting with the lead GMSA midwives to say, how are you doing? And hear them say, things are going well. Yeah. Because they're out there in the country and I've no idea what their world is like, really. I can only go by hearsay. And I know when I was a regional antenatal and newborn screening coordinator, having Pat Ward contact me from Kettering to say, how are you doing? What work are you doing? Is there anything I can help you with? It was just lovely, you know. So I do make the effort to touch base as often as I can with the lead GMSA midwives and basically broadening that reach to other people in the field. So I sit on the RCOG Genomics, the new Genomics group. The first meeting will be in October and it's having that connectivity with the RCOG. But also I've tapped into the National Bereavement Network of Midwives, which is chaired by Jane Scott. And I've also just tapped into the National Network of Neonatal Nurses and Midwives, which is chaired by another colleague of Jane's. And this is to help push the projects forward because a couple of the lead midwives, Denise, for example, they're looking at the bereavement pathway and they don't know about what's happening out there. So it's my job to sort of do the groundwork and serve them to help them best. And obviously the RCM, very much in touch with the RCM. And of course, Team Middo. So sitting in NHS England, particularly in this virtual world, you know, it's tricky because we've got different directorates with key people and you have to go out and reach, you know, to make a communication. Not like the old world where you'd go down to the second floor or up to the fifth floor.
Along
or
the corridor.
What, yeah. But people are aware of me. I'm in touch with the regional chief midwives as well. My networks, I should say, are big and getting bigger. That's great. Yeah.
And so what would you say the biggest challenges are for you in your role?
Challenges. Some I've just mentioned. I suppose a newer challenge for me at the moment is talking to professionals who I wouldn't normally talk to. So, for example, connecting with IT leads, connecting with people who are bringing all this together but are not clinical. So I'm clinical, but everybody else around me does different things. Commissioners, digital and data, clinical scientists. We're a real myriad in the genomics unit. So the language they speak, I sometimes have to step back and do a lot of reflection to be able to be on par with them. But I'm involved with the Prenatal Genomic Networks of Excellence and I'm the clinical lead for that in the unit. And that's essentially bringing together key leaders to drive prenatal genomics to make it bigger and grander, to upskill it. So that we've got whole genome sequencing and we've got NIPD, you know, coming to the front of care. That is a big challenge at the moment because there's such wide reach in that group. And it's, again, you've got to be very patient for waiting for people to come back with a response so that you can then update the SRO in the unit. Obviously, time pressures. People want things now, and you've got a catalogue of things to get through and back-to-back meetings. So, like everyone, there's challenges, and of course, working from home. I'd rather be in an office with people, if the truth be known.
You mentioned during chatting how much you gained from kind of having those reach out to you to check in with you and the support you felt from that. Where do you gain that element from now that you're at the top at a national level?
Obviously, I've got line management. We've got a lovely line manager who's a clinical pharmacist, Vicky Chaplin, but also talking to the lead GMSA midwives. You know, it's home for me because they understand me. And as I said, you know, although I'm in a senior position, I'm quite happy to get my hands dirty as well, but you need that camaraderie to make things work. Yeah.
So it's almost the support you're giving them, you're actually gaining support yourself from that relationship.
Yeah.
And so looking to the future then, what is the most exciting bit, do you think, that's coming in genomics in midwifery?
The prenatal genomic networks of excellence will be driving genomics. And obviously, you know, that's so important in maternity for very anxious pregnant women with a problem. So whole genome sequencing, you know, is on the horizon for the R21, the rapid sequencing service. The eligibility criteria we hope is going to extend. So it's going to open up the door for more investigations of, you know, ultrasound phenotype. Because at the moment, you know, it's limited, but everything starts small and then it expands. And NIPD.
Can you explain what NIPD is?
So NIPD is non-invasive prenatal diagnosis, similar to NIPT, but as it says in the title, you'll get a diagnosis. Yeah. And if you get a diagnosis from that, then amnios and CVSs may be a thing of the past.
Yeah. So a blood sample from mum.
Yeah.
Which can pick up on fetal DNA, which still blows my mind that they can pick up such tiny amounts of DNA and enough to do that kind of test. And I think it's in that area that it really brings home just how much the technologies that we've got are coming on. Because, you know, when we did genetic tests even 10, 15 years ago, the amount of blood that we had to take for that, and the idea that they can do it on such microscopic amounts of DNA is just incredible.
Exactly. And you can see that that's going to change things probably for midwives. I think NIPT was, you know, has been delivered systematically and it's under evaluation at the moment. But the training for NIPT, you know, was pretty robust. NIPD is going to be the same. It's going to require, you know, midwives to upskill in this area. And I don't think it can be assumed that they're going to do it straight away. It's still very much with genetic counsellors. And you will understand the intricacies of that because the results that you get are not always straightforward. And there's still a lot for midwives to learn in this space.
And they absolutely have the skills in the toolkit for it. You know, they know more than they realise for that conversation, but it's just taking time to do that learning and understanding why that conversation is different and, you know, kind of bringing it into that context. But they're such a skilled workforce.
They are.
Use those skills day in, day out that are needed for those conversations. So, you know, I've no doubt that it's the right place for it to sit. We've heard a little bit in some of the other podcasts about the generation study. Can you explain to us what your role might be from a national level with that?
Yeah, the generation study, I came into that space around about 2022 as the connector between GEL and the GU unit. Things have changed since then. The infrastructure's getting a little bit tighter and more formalised. And my role in this is to be in the system, again with midwives, to find out what's happening, what the changes are, how people are progressing with the, with the rollout of the pilot sites. So I still, work very closely with them. But now that the pilot sites are getting up and running, they've got the lead GMSA midwives to lean on as well. Yeah. And in MIGS, we always have an update. And of course, membership, I forgot to mention, we've got 2 lovely midwives who belong to MIGS who sit with the generation study as well. So, yeah.
So your updates are from right in the heart of the study.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting to us, Donna. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear you talk, and it really does feel like your enthusiasm is literally infectious. So
thank you, Helen. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you would like more information about the topics that we have discussed today, then you can find these on both websites, ney-genomics.org.uk/podcast and southeastgenomics.nhs.uk/GMSA. You'll also find here all the episodes in our podcast series. All episodes can also be accessed via Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all other major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.